Hello, my name is Mishley Smith Tynes. I am a journalist, a teacher, and an author. My motto is dialogue built on pure intention can incite change. Lately, I've produced a number of live shows on Instagram that have dealt with racial trauma and mental health. Since April of this year, I have interviewed people of different races from the UK, India, Canada, and of course, the United States. It has been an amazing experience. I am now honored to be here with all of you today. I am deeply inspired by the work that you teens are doing. Young people today are vocal, dedicated, educated, resourceful, committed, and wise beyond their years. Thank you for providing me with such a wonderful opportunity to be a part of the amazing work that all of you are doing. I appreciate you, all of you. Your mission, which is to bring people closer during this time of separation and see the true meaning of empathy and togetherness, well, those words are very close to my heart. Our world has undergone unprecedented change in just a few months. More than 170,000 people have died due to the COVID 19 pandemic, and the number seems to be rising every single day. Deepest condolences if you or your family have been affected. After spending months on lockdown, our country witnessed the death of an American citizen at the hands of a public servant, which sparked protests, outcries, and in some cases, complete chaos and pandemonium. The American citizen was George Floyd, and the public servant was a police officer. As a result of the raw emotion that has been exposed, which came at a crucial time after so many Americans had been confined to their homes for months, in the midst of all of this, we somehow found our voices and rose above the pain. I feel bad that few adults have taken the time to wade through all of the chaos and explain to you teens, as well as to the children, literally, what in the world is going on. I'm pretty sure you have seen the BLM protests. You may even chant Black Lives Matter with your friends. But what does all of that really mean? As a teen, you might say that to support your friends or even because it seems the right thing to do and the concept is meaningful. But I'm a teacher. My job is to guide you. I don't want you to just jump on the bandwagon, but instead, I want you to really know the true meaning of the term. In general, the statement Black Lives Matter is said as a reminder and to draw attention to the issue of American citizens dying at the hands of those who take an oath to protect and serve them, police officers. There are Americans who are murdered simply because of their skin color. African Americans have had to fight for justice on so many levels, but that term is said to remind America that its African American citizens should never have been traumatized, abused, and even killed at the hands of police officers. It is a declaration that these injustices must stop. The deaths of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Rayshard Brooks, and so many others have drawn the spotlight to so many injustices in our country. Also, the overtly racist murder of Ahmaud Arbery because of his skin color drew even more blaring attention to the reality of hatred on the basis of skin color in America. I also have my own personal experience with police officers who abused their authority. When I was only 14, my mother and I were racially profiled. What does that mean? Profiling is when police officers stop and harass individuals on the basis of skin color. The darker a person's skin color, the more likely they are to encounter this type of behavior. This can happen in black communities, but in my case, my mother and I lived in a predominantly white neighborhood. The police officers that profiled us later said they had been told during the morning roll call to be on the lookout for two black male robbers. At the time, I was very tiny at 14 and certainly didn't look anything like a male robber. My mother had gone to the bank, and as she left, two police officers followed her out of the parking lot. They sped in front of her with their sirens blaring, then jumped out with guns drawn. I jumped out screaming at them not to shoot. I didn't realize I could have been shot just for doing that. We were allowed to leave, and my mother took the officers to court and won a settlement. But think about it, who really won that day? No one. Settlements for things like this are funded by taxpayers just like police salaries are. And I was certainly no winner. I had nightmares for years. It took me forever to learn how to drive because I was so paranoid of the police. Many of my friends, especially my male friends, have had similar experiences. My husband told me about when he first started driving and he was pulled over his first time out with his brand new driver's license. Imagine that. You finally get your freedom and your independence. Your parents have allowed you to take the car out. You've just picked up your friends. Soon after that, you're pulled over and a gun is pointed in your face. You've done nothing wrong. It's all because of your skin color. Do you feel the trauma in that? Almost every black man I know, especially those who are dark-skinned, have similar memories. As a result, mothers of black children have different worries than other mothers. Can you see that even raising a child who is dark-skinned is a completely different experience? There are certain freedoms that mothers raising lighter-skinned children experience that moms of darker-skinned children don't have the luxury of experiencing. Think of only that for just a few seconds. Parents of black children have to educate them about all of this at a very early age. We have to tell our kids that the world will treat them differently because of their skin color. We have to prepare them for how they will be treated in school systems. We have to make them aware of what the police might do to them. Does it seem fair to you that mothers of black children, especially black boys, have to have a separate fear than other mothers? Or that they have to sit their sons down multiple times for the same conversation? Just looking at all of these examples, does it really seem like all Americans are free? Freedom is not just about not having to walk around in chains. Freedom is also an ease of thinking. Freedom is a thought process and a state of mind. The darker your skin is in this country, the less freedom of mind and peace of mind you have. Imagine walking around with that kind of trauma. Similar things may have happened to your darker skinned classmates without you even knowing. How many opportunities do we have to talk about such things? Indeed, for many African Americans, our very lives have depended on white people and others not knowing how we truly feel. At the very least, our livelihoods have been at stake. In worst case scenarios, we could be killed. Think about the stories I've told you. If anyone, myself included, had gotten in a police officer's face and started yelling and cursing, it's pretty easy to see that my life could just simply easily be taken away from me, right? For most black people, this is a very real fear and a danger that is always at the forefront of our minds. My early experiences with the police traumatized me in ways that I struggle with to this day. The experiences of my husband and friends have created deep emotional wounds. Have you ever heard of childhood wounds? Well, when someone goes through something very tragic and traumatizing as a young child, that person will need a lot of help healing all that pain as they become an adult. If that person does not heal the pain of the past, They can end up being very mean and extremely hateful. They can end up making very poor decisions in life. Their toxic actions can end up harming other people, anyone they encounter. Compare America to a child with these wounds who is trying to navigate through a dysfunctional family. What we have witnessed in America over this past several months, it has been our country's attempts at healing its childhood wounds. This country was built on racism, hatred, and violence, dysfunction in the most destructive forms. For instance, did you know that the historical formation and foundation of the police was to catch slaves, to recover humans as property? Think about that. Those who are supposed to protect and serve all American citizens instead have a history built on hurting and harming people of color. When you look at America through that lens, does it make a little more sense why people are now calling to defund the police? This is what is meant by systemic racism. Systemic racism infects systems that are supposed to protect its citizens. You can see the ugly stains of racism in housing, the educational system, law enforcement, and many of our country's laws. There is a violence that is attached to the foundation of the way black people are viewed in this country. Not I, not you, no one can stop anyone from being a racist, but there are supposed to be laws to protect my life and my safety. This is especially true of the police. If you're a racist and you have a position of power and you can take someone's life in your racist actions, well, that's a problem. And that is only the tip of the iceberg. Did you know that Thomas Jefferson owned slaves and had biracial children from his slaves? Did you know that the New York Stock Exchange was built on top of African burial grounds, on top of the bodies of slaves? Have you ever heard of Wall Street? Have you ever heard of Black Wall Street? At a time when America did not want us and segregated us by moving us away from whites, we thrived. We had many amazing communities, like one in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and it had it all. In the 20s, blacks in the Greenwood community lived in opulence with schools, hotels, movie theaters, newspapers, and more. There were many black doctors and lawyers living and working in Greenwood. But in 1921, the community was destroyed by an angry white racist mob who was jealous and mad at the success. More than 300 people were killed. 35 square blocks were destroyed. A mob dropped dynamite as they flew overhead in planes. America didn't want us. We thrived where we were planted, and then we were killed. Looking at the end of the story, some choose to assume that some black people who live in poor communities want to live that way. But it is important to know that black communities were created. And then, blackface. It almost seems like you can get in trouble for even talking about it. But no one ever stops to explain to you what it is and why black people find it so offensive. And have you ever read about it in a textbook? I doubt it. Blackface is just one part of a long-standing history of actual propaganda against black people. It comes with stereotypical assumptions of laziness and stupidity. It is the actual hijacking of an image of an entire race of people, which is why it is so upsetting to black people. It is an image that America made to tell others to fear black people, to consider them untrustworthy, and to always question their intelligence. If there were a simplified image of you that were promoted all around the world, wouldn't you be upset too? Yes, racism is as old as America itself. In some ways, America is afraid of its own history. So why are people so angry about it? My philosophy is that none are properly taught history. Most Americans don't know the true history of their own country. Those that do know are putting those that don't know into a complete state of shock. We all need to know the full richness of our history. We need to give credence to the horrible things that have happened on American soil. Painting a beautiful false picture of our country does no favors to anyone. In fact, it does a disservice to us all. Without the backdrop of history, people fuel arguments on raw emotion without knowing the underlying background. It's like coming to the end of a book, reading the last few pages, then judging the entire story without knowing the pages that came before. Knowing and understanding the pages that came before and reading the entire proverbial book can help you to feel the curse of intergenerational racism and its hatred and violence. Otherwise, people look at a situation and say, well, why is it okay to say black power and Mexican pride and all kinds of other pride, but then as soon as someone says white power or white pride, then it's a problem? There's an entire history that's not being taught. I'm a teacher, so I know that you're not being taught everything. In school, you're not learning a true reflection of history through a timeline that makes sense. So if racism is so old, why are people so angry? Shouldn't they be used to it by now? I don't think anyone can ever get used to being mistreated. Even the label with which to call us often becomes convoluted. There's been a long history of choices, probably starting with the term Negro, derived from the Spanish word negro, meaning black. Another very derogatory term has derived from this word. That word has caused a great degree of confusion because it seems fine for black people to use the derogatory term amongst themselves, but it causes a huge racial and ethical problem when others use it. This is because, like in so many other situations, black folk have used the pain and turned it into power. You can find instances of this all throughout American culture, but namely with blues music and soul food. Then there have been other terms like colored. In reference to myself, I prefer the term black. I refer to my American brothers and sisters as black folk. I think of black folk around the world who are united with me by color and plight as Pan-Africans, which is an all-encompassing term. For people of other races who are referring to the aforementioned group, it is probably best to use the term African American or person of color. As you can see, there are different outlooks for different groups of people. There are many different types of people within any particular race. As we think of history, it is important to know that some problems cropped up with the naming of some people as black and some people as white. America has actually used these terms to its advantage and decides when some people can have the title of white and when to remove the title. For instance, America has not always considered Italians, Irish, and Jewish people to be white. Think about the ways that using these terms can improve or harm someone's quality of life. Again, it is important not to assign any type of behavior to an entire race. Of course, there are some white people who are simply racist. They are married to their point of view, and it would be a miracle for anyone or anything to change that. These types of people deliberately gaslight others. But what does gaslighting mean? It's when someone creates so much confusion that it makes someone else question their own experience. People do this by changing the subject, or they'll ask you for statistics, or for other irrelevant details, or they'll label things as political and try to limit your right to talk about it. This type of behavior is draining and a waste of time. I am a teacher of people, but I do not allow anyone to waste my time. I will not be baited into an argument. Always know that issues of police murdering or abusing citizens is not politics. These are human rights issues. If you're a member of Student United Nations, forensics, or speech and debate, these are good stories that our nation needs to be dealing with. Don't let the dialogue die. I've learned that for some white people, they feel as though their concept of reality is being challenged and threatened. They didn't know that black people were having so many problems in their own country. As I say, they didn't know because our very lives depended on them not knowing. Expressing our true feelings about our mistreatment could cost us our lives or our livelihood at the very least. Then there are some white people who feel angry with the way other white people are acting, such as with going in black communities and destroying things, but making it seem like the black residents destroyed their own communities. Such people are also hurt, embarrassed, and angry with the past actions of other racist whites throughout history. I have learned that such individuals sometimes get in arguments or shut down because they feel helpless and blamed. Then there are also the thoughts and opinions of African Americans to consider. Part of developing the new America will need to come with the understanding that all black people do not think the same way. For instance, some black people say they are tired of explaining and then they shut down and they refuse to talk about any of these racial issues. This is because we have talked about and explained for years and decades. Throughout history, black people have boycotted and had sit ins. We've been beaten. We've been hosed. We've marched on Washington. We've protested both peacefully and violently. We've written governors, senators, and presidents, lost jobs, had our lives threatened, and had our lives taken to tell America about the horrors of its racism. Isn't it exasperating just listening to that? Surely you can understand that level of frustration. But almost on cue, the young people of America have stepped up to the plate. You all have done the protests. You've arranged events like this one to strengthen your thinking skills and sharpen your thought process. Again, for that, I thank you. Many of you have bravely stood up to the generations before you and have eloquently told them that racism has no part in your life. Throughout all of this, we start to see that we can't lump any group of people into one heap, especially using words like racist or thug or any other type of label. Take the time to learn about the situation and the people involved. So let's go back to my motto and let's really think about it. Let's break it all down. Dialogue built on pure intention can incite change. So first of all, what's a dialogue? Well, that's a conversation, a give and take verbal dance between two people. Each must give the other an opportunity to talk, and each must also reserve the power of, I don't know, rather than just spouting out words simply to win an argument. Both have to realize that there is no argument. This is where pure intention comes in. Well, but what's that? Pure intention is what happens when we forget about race and politics and gender and class. We throw all the labels out the window. We deal with each other as human beings. When we see each other on a human level, we become concerned about each other's pain. At a very deep level, you start to see how the pain of your fellow human is the same as your own pain. Pure intention goes beyond basic respect and it cuts to the level of care and concern. We move forward with compassion. Well, what's that? Compassion is equal parts love, patience, and forgiveness. This will allow us to step forward in empathy. Empathy is putting yourself in the other person's situation. As the saying goes, you walk a mile in their shoes, and you really care enough to find out what they are going through by actively listening to them. Trust the stories your friends tell you about racism. I have so much respect for many of you because you're already doing that. You have an integrity that many adults don't. If you have friends that never spoke out until the past few months, you need to understand why you never knew they felt this way. Okay, so now we understand that a conversation between two people who care about each other can incite something. But what does incite mean? The word incite actually has somewhat negative connotations. Usually, when people think of inciting something, they think of inciting a riot or inciting anger. But I chose that word strategically. I prefer to think of it as sparking something, inciting as being an active catalyst for something that would not have happened otherwise. And what is that? Change. Our country needs to change. We need to give up the painful history of violence and racism and create a country that lives up to the promise that is America. Again, my strongest advice to you is do not let this dialogue die. Dialogue on everything, on so many things, is often closed in this country. We get uncomfortable because we never have had these conversations and we never talk about these things. People stay hurt based on misunderstandings and a lack of information. Then they stay stuck in their assumptions and they don't ask questions, and that can be dangerous. Don't let this dialogue sputter out. Tragedies like George Floyd seem to happen every 2 to 5 to 10 years. A singer called Sting has a song called History Will Teach Us Nothing. Check out the lyrics to that song, because if we don't learn from history and make some changes, you'll be seeing the same problems with your children and your grandchildren. This is why I'm so proud of all of you for making some moves to change these ways of thinking and to rebuild your America. I'm willing to help you with whatever I can in this process. Consider it a process. Reach out to me on social media so we can do this together. Maybe we need a weekly forum for teens that I can help facilitate. Or maybe we should organize a campaign to write to politicians. Or maybe we should join one of the many efforts that are already in progress. Whatever it is, let's put our minds together and do what we can to start changing things. But where can we start? It seems like such a big, hulking task. It's hard to figure out where to even grab a chunk from all of this. Well, let's start with compassion. From there, let's move to empathy. Think about the personal stories I've shared with you and the violence you've seen in our country in just the past few months. That should cause you to feel outraged no matter what your race is. With compassion and empathy under our belt, we can start thinking of some of the more complicated issues. For instance, what does it mean to be an ally? Like I said before, it means trusting others' experiences. Like I said, I respect you guys because most of you trust the stories your friends tell you about racism. That feeling of injustice is just the start of allyship. Being an ally also means speaking up when you see a person of another race being mistreated. You guys are doing this. You're standing up for what is right, and I applaud you. There are many adults who lack the tact and foresight that you young people have. To start, we have to learn to embrace our differences. We have to make a conscious decision to do this internally within our individual heart and mind. Then we think of the physical actions that can complement that change. What are the physical representations of allyship? Becoming an ally is a chance for us to unite as Americans. but more importantly, as humans. We start to see racism as an American problem and a human rights issue, not a political issue. So, what realities do we need to step forward into the future with? For instance, what happens when you learn all the things and you change all the thoughts and you do all the stuff and something still goes wrong? Remember, not all black people will see things the same way. You might implement everything I've told you and everything that you learned and come across a black person that has no intentions of working with you. Be good anyway. Do your best anyway. See it as part of your evolution as a human. Don't let anyone keep you from growing as a human being. Don't let ignorance on the part of any other human deter you from your goal. Part of all of this is understanding that we each get a chance to make our own decisions and live life according to our own standards. Let others decide their thoughts and actions for themselves, while you get to make those decisions for you. There are so many instances in this country where dialogue is closed. Open your mouth and keep talking. Develop compassion for yourself and others and never stop growing. So, what did you learn from all of this? What can you apply right now? What is something you learned that challenged the way you thought before? How can you affect change right now, today? Keep it simple. Start small. Decide on one small thing you can do today. Maybe you could start with a memory, like what's the last racist thing that you heard or saw or read? What was your reaction? Did you laugh? What will you do next time? Change starts with you. You can affect change right now, today, even if it is only in your own mind and in your own heart. This is the start of changing your thought process. After that, branch out a little bit at a time. Ask a black friend about their experiences. Try to make a friend of a person with another race. Let empathy be your badge. Wear it like you wear your clothes. What does empathy mean to you? Did anything that I say today lead you to become more empathetic no matter what your race is? Start simple. Start with thanking yourself for listening to me today and for offering your time and attention to my entire speech. Yay, you! Phenomenal. I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to me today. I hope my words have touched your heart and inspired you to move forward in positive action. Follow me across social media by searching my name, Mishley Smith Tynes. You can find me on Facebook, Pinterest, YouTube, and Twitter, but my current favorite seems to be Instagram. I especially like that. I like it there because I get to do live shows. I also have a kid-friendly account at the Instagram handle @TeacherTynes. Again, thank you so much for listening. I'd love to take your questions now.